The stakes are high for both the Denver Broncos and the Indianapolis Colts. Both teams coming off a bye and both teams really already entering the playoffs. We're going to break it down on a special crossover Thursday edition. Locked On Broncos, Locked On Colts.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is crossover Thursday edition. Locked On Broncos, Locked On Colts. Super exciting for both of these teams this time of year, being relevant in the playoff discussion. Welcome in to the discussion where we're going to break down keys to victory today. We're going to talk about some big storylines coming out of the bye week for two teams with, again, everything at stake in this week's game. My name is Sayre Bedinger, co-host of the Locked On Broncos podcast, here with Jake Arthur, co-host of Locked On Colts over there as well. And we're super excited to be breaking down a matchup between, this is kind of the Peyton Manning Bowl, isn't it, Jake? Here we love the Sheriff in Denver, and I know he obviously built a legacy there in Indianapolis as well. But before we get into some of the big storylines for the Indianapolis Colts, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Jake, let's just jump right into this because, of course, I know everybody in Broncos country was huge Patriots fans a couple of weeks ago. Everybody's afraid of the Colts right now. We hear the pitter patter coming from behind. The Colts, the Dolphins, a number of teams. I know the Colts are focused on all the same teams as Broncos fans are right now, but coming out of the bye, what are the biggest storylines for this team? Of course, the stakes are high, but everybody is going through different injury stuff this time of year. What are the Colts dealing with right now? What are the biggest storylines for them?
Yeah, so for the Colts, their playoffs have started, essentially. They can't afford to lose any more games, particularly this one. The Broncos are right ahead of them. They're 2 games ahead in that final AFC playoff spot, and you cannot afford to lose games against your direct competition. The Colts do have the head-to-head tiebreaker with the Dolphins. They'd love to get one with the Broncos as well, because it's not necessarily that they have to win out to get in. They kind of need some help also. So this is a must-win game. You're looking for more progress from Anthony Richardson, as well as for the play of those around him to kind of step it up as well. It's no secret everybody's seen kind of the really poor passing stat lines from Anthony Richardson. There's a lot of context that goes into it. But generally, everybody around him, as well as him as well, everyone's got to pick it up a little bit. You're kind of paying some stars to be stars, but they haven't really necessarily found that rhythm yet this year and played to their pay grade. There's a lot of injuries as well. So this is an incredibly busy week for the Colts when you consider guys coming back in, guys that may still be out. But you had the bye week, but man, we came back to kind of a full table this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about that, guys maybe not playing up to their pay grade for the Colts, because I think from the Broncos fans' perspective, going into this game, everybody's thinking, oh my gosh, they've got Jonathan Taylor, they've got Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs and Alec Pierce averaging over 22 yards a catch, like all these playmakers. And then, of course, a very talented quarterback in Anthony Richardson, who we saw. He's capable of getting the job done even with a lower completion rate. So what is that with the Colts right now that you're kind of thinking like, man, guys aren't living up to their pay grade? Like, where is that coming from?
So one kind of hiccup they've had, at least with the run game and Jonathan Taylor, was they've had some issues with injuries on the offensive line. For a stretch, they were starting 3 rookies, and one of them was an undrafted rookie. And he's been kind of yanked from the lineup and replaced with someone who is from the Colts offensive line heyday from a few years ago. Mark Glowinski took higher pay in free agency with the Giants, got benched and then cut there, and now he's back as a street free agent with the Colts. So if that goes to show you how things were going with the offensive line, it's still a decent offensive line when they've got kind of general health about them. But it's like Jonathan Taylor just did not find much success running in that situation. Wasn't creating yards like we're accustomed to seeing him do so. But, when you've got a running back you're paying that much money to, he's one of the premier running backs in the league and is paid like it. you got to do more. He's only got, in the last 5 games, he's got one 100-yard game and only one rushing touchdown. He did have a receiving touchdown in their previous game, but that was kind of on a broken play, like something that wasn't how they drew it up, essentially. He did have like 96 yards, I believe, in that last game, but averaged below 4 yards per carry. They were just running it a lot. So you're looking to see the Colts reestablish that run game because he's still there. Like, he's still Jonathan Taylor. I just think he's finding it difficult to run behind this blocking right now. And then when you look at Michael Pittman Jr., he's kind of been dealing with a debilitating back injury all year. He's playing through it. He did have to miss one game because of it. But at the same time, it's extremely gutty to play through something like that. But you have to still be contributing if you're out there. And in all but 3 games this season, he's had below 50 yards receiving. He's had a few big performances. But generally, it's been just feast or famine for him, essentially. And these are guys that you're paying premier money to be stars, to rise up and help Anthony Richardson move that offense. But it's been Richardson since he came back from that benching, basically having to put the hero cape on late in games. He has led 2 fourth-quarter comeback victories for the Colts on the road, the Jets and the Patriots. And those were games they should have won a lot more comfortably than they did if they wouldn't have had so many self-inflicted wounds. So you hope that the bye week was good to them in the sense that they kind of caught their breath, cleaned up some of their own issues, because it's one thing for your opponent to beat you, but for you to hand your opponent opportunity after opportunity because of penalties and turnovers and drop balls and things like that, you just have to get that stuff cleaned up at least, especially when you're walking this thin line hoping to get to the postseason.
Well, and it's obviously going to require that defense for Indy to step up, going on the road, playing against the Denver Broncos offense that has been a lot better in the last 2 months. And so what do you see when you look at this Colts defense? What's the identity of this defense, or where are they going to be able to make a run on that side of the ball? Is it going to be the pass rush getting the job done? Is it going to be the secondary creating turnovers? Like, as you come off this bye here defensively for the Colts, what's it going to be that pushes this team into the postseason potentially?
Well, this is a really tough matchup for the Colts because against offenses that get rid of the ball quickly and they have guys that move around like Bo Nix does, I kind of compare them to like the Jaguars when the Jaguars are performing well offensively. That's been really difficult for the Colts to deal with. It neutralizes the pass rush. They can't get to the quarterback because he's getting rid of the ball so quickly. They have bubble screens and all these quick outlets ready to go. And we actually asked Sayre Franklin about that today because it's no secret, especially with Sean Payton. We've seen it with the Colts year after year. Anytime they've played him, doesn't matter what the Colts coaching staff is, they have trouble with his passing games. And Franklin basically just said, it's going to be about, just disguising coverages and throwing different coverages at them because they know they're going to be doing all the quick stuff. And, if you take away Bo Nix's first read, his second read, and make him wait a little bit, then that gives the defensive line the opportunity because they do have good players up front. I mean, DeForest Buckner, everybody knows how good he is. Grover Stewart is kind of an unsung hero, but very effective as well. Kwity Paye, Laiatu Latu, Dio Adangbo, all these guys are capable of getting to the quarterback. They don't have the pass rush the Broncos do necessarily, but these are guys who do make things difficult for opposing offenses. If that secondary can buy them time to get to the quarterback, that'll be huge because otherwise you're looking at problems behind that line because the middle of the field is very vulnerable, both against the run and the pass. And then the secondary is fine. They're nothing to write home about. They are probably going to get victimized against like really overwhelming, when the opponents have the clear upper hand in the passing game. Usually going to look like that. You look at the Lions game, for example. I think one-on-one they match up well, but it's going to be totally dependent on how much time the pass rush gives them.
Well, the Broncos are going to be trying to take a little bit of pressure off Bo Nix in that regard by hopefully running the ball better than they have most of the season. Maybe caught a glimpse against the Cleveland Browns. Jaleel McLaughlin had a nice game, but is there anything to build on there? Are we going to see Javonte Williams featured? We're going to break down some keys for the Denver Broncos, some big storylines as they head into this Week 15 matchup against the Indianapolis Colts on today's Crossover Thursday edition. Locked On Broncos, Locked On Colts. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers, you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app, it'll give you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So you get a hunch in the middle of the game. You can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you can find things like the Denver Broncos being 3.5-point favorites. The line moving a little bit here after starting off this week at 5.5-point favorites for the home team there for the Denver Broncos. So go check out FanDuel.com, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's Crossover Thursday is also brought to you by Game Time, and there's nothing quite like seeing your favorite football team play live. In fact, there's nothing quite like seeing any of your favorites live and in person, whether it's your favorite football team, whether it's your favorite music artist or comedian. Game Time is making it so much easier for you to make all of those memories that you want to make seeing your favorites live and in person. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats at all the venues you want to visit so that you don't have to waste any time searching through thousands of tickets. And it's so easy. Just pick an upcoming game or event in the Game Time app, browse through the different seats on Game Time Picks, and then you can find the super deals. You can find so many different features of the Game Time app that makes it easier for you to find the best price on and great seats. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. It's Crossover Thursday, and we are breaking down some of the biggest storylines for both the Colts and the Broncos on today's show. My name's Sayre Bedinger here with Jake Arthur, but once again, I want to say thank you to all you everydayers that make Locked On Broncos or Locked On Colts your first listen of the day every single day. We appreciate you so much for making us part of your day, however you choose to do so. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit subscribe wherever you listen, as well as on YouTube over there. Jake, let's break down this kind of the key storylines from the Broncos perspective, because obviously they played that really exciting game. Although, I have to admit, those types of games take years off my life. I know people are always like, I just want to see a great game. When it comes to the Broncos, I don't want it to be a great game. Like, I want to see the blowout. I want to relax during the game. I'm sure you're the same way, but a game like we saw against the Cleveland Browns, it's really tough to kind of gauge what you do coming out of the bye week, because it wasn't necessarily indicative of what we've come to see from the Broncos this year. Now, offensively speaking, the big story coming out of the bye, and the big story for a lot of weeks this season, it's really been, can the Broncos get the running game going? And I know we'll talk about, statistically speaking, obviously the Colts 31st in the NFL in total run defense this season. Like you mentioned, though, with Anthony Richardson, a lot of times stats, they require additional context, right? And so there's reasons why teams are running the ball against the Colts more. Maybe they are more susceptible against the run. The Patriots had over 200 rushing yards against them. Is that an area that you feel like maybe the Broncos, this could be a get-right sort of situation for them, as they have struggled to find any consistency running the ball offensively this year?
Unfortunately, I think so, yeah. Because there has been just a big failure to just execute in the middle of the defense. Guys are getting to that second level quite easily. Even when the Colts defense, DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart on the inside, they opened up those gaps for the linebackers to shoot through. it's just not happening. EJ Speed, I believe, going into last week, led the NFL in missed tackles with 20. Sayre Franklin, he has a tendency, he can, if he's able to get off blocks, sometimes he just overruns the angle. And we're talking like in the trenches here. It's not like it's out in the open field. So the linebackers are really struggling to kind of finish the runs. And that's leading to a lot of yards after contact. I think it was the Lions game when it came to the Colts missed tackles. The Lions had like over 300 yards basically combined through the air. There's yards after contact and all those and based off of broken tackles. And it's just like that is killing the Colts, their inability to just get guys on the ground. That's why you see, Nick Cross, the safety, is like leading all defensive backs in the NFL in tackles. And he's like on pace to break Steve Atwater's record for tackles by the safety. And EJ Speed and Sayre Franklin have 1 million tackles. I mean, they're missing a lot of them, but they're having to make a ton of tackles at the second level. So the Colts defensive line, again, they have been good overall, but they do have some guys that, just struggle to get off of blocks at times. Your corners right now maybe aren't the best at run defense. When you had Juju Brents in there, that's a guy who wants to get his nose dirty and make plays. But, Samuel Womack is a bit undersized. Jalen Jones is fine, but he's going to miss some tackles. Kenny Moore is one of the best slot defenders in the NFL and wants to do all the dirty work as well. But he's only one guy. He's only going to be on one side of the field. So the run game on any given week, you can never guarantee that the Colts are going to be able to shut it down. If you're dealing with a terrible offense, like with a terrible line and run game, even then normally you could say yes, but the Patriots have the worst offensive line arguably in the NFL, and they just allowed, a big performance to happen. So this is just not a team where you can forecast anything with confidence. You could say a struggling Broncos run game, the Colts will be able to stifle that, but we just haven't seen them take advantage of those clear, mismatches. So this probably reads a little bit more like a get right game for the Broncos run D, especially, in Denver. They're accustomed to playing in those elements. It's also December now, so we're not just talking about the elevation. We're talking about cold outside elevation. I don't know what the weather is supposed to be like yet. We're still several days out, but I mean, this plays way more into Denver's hand, I think.
Well, you talked about, mismatches, and there was no bigger mismatch that I've seen this season than when Jerry Jeudy just came to town and absolutely shredded Levi Wallace on the other side of the field. You mentioned Juju Brents. My heart hurts hearing his name because he left my Iowa Hawkeyes way back when.
Ooh, yeah.
Obviously, Riley Moss, has uplifted the spirits in Denver this year a little bit opposite Pat Surtain, but it's not looking like Riley Moss is going to play, which raises some questions about who the heck's going to be out there, because you can't have Levi Wallace out there. He was benched against the Cleveland Browns, probably way too late, but also the timing was interesting because Broncos put Chris Abrams-Draine out there with the Browns down by 2 points, a potential game-winning drive. You throw a rookie who hasn't been active all season out there. We don't know if we're going to see Chris Abrams-Draine. We don't know if they're going to let Levi Wallace go try things out again. Defensively, the biggest storyline for the Denver Broncos this week is who's playing opposite Pat Surtain, and are they going to be able to bounce back and recover after allowing nearly 500 yards from Jameis Winston, half of which came from one guy. So that's an area where the Colts may be they may be salivating a little bit, saying, hey, whoever's playing opposite Pat Surtain, we're going to go attack that guy.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Alec Pierce is their downfield threat, but they've had a real problem of waiting too long into games to get him going. Whether it's, a deep dig or whatever it is, it seems like it's not really coming until the third or fourth quarter, and they're trying to dig out of a hole. I mean, he has the ability to be a game changer. We've seen it against the Texans, against the Jaguars. He's had some massive performances, but you just got to get him going earlier in the game. Josh Downs is really assuming he's able to come back this week. He missed their last game with a shoulder, his first game of the season since, he started out with an ankle injury. But this was the first time he'd really, had to miss some time. That was kind of unexpected. But he's really the straw that stirs the drink in the passing game. Anthony Richardson is very comfortable with him. He's a slot receiver, so he gets those quick one-on-one wins to move the chains, but he's also very effective down the field as well. So he's really, from the slot, the guy that wins kind of in every zone of the field. So Michael Pittman Jr., whatever he can give you is great. I mean, he's playing through stuff, but the tight ends don't exist. So it's going to kind of be, if they're going to make big plays, it'll probably come through Josh Downs and Alec Pierce.
Yeah, we'll see how the Broncos defend those two guys. Obviously, we don't know whether or not Pat Surtain is going to be following anybody around. That's always interesting to watch. Jaquan McMillan, the Broncos slot corner, has been a very good player this year, just had a pick 6 against the Cleveland Browns as well. So the matchup between the Broncos secondary and obviously the Colts receiving core, I was talking to Cody on our episode yesterday. It's kind of odd to see a team that has 4 wide receivers atop the target share in terms of, what you typically see backs and tight ends getting involved. Like you mentioned, this is a game where maybe a tight end getting involved on either side could prove to be the pendulum, the thing that swings the pendulum, because the Broncos haven't had that really either. So Jake and I are going to talk about some keys to victory in this game. What do these teams have to do? Because obviously they have to win. There's no question about it. I mean, the Colts, it's obvious. They've got to climb up the rankings in the AFC. The Denver Broncos, if they lose this game, I mean, the tiebreakers will go towards the Ravens, the Chargers, and the Colts. That's not what you want to have in December. So obviously the stakes are high. The playoffs are basically here already for these two teams. We're going to be talking about specific keys to victory on today's Crossover Thursday edition. Locked On Broncos, Locked On Colts. Today's Crossover Thursday episode, Locked On Broncos, Locked On Colts, is brought to you by Built Rewards. And if you're a renter, listen here, okay? This is a total game changer. Thanks to Built, you can now earn points on your rent payments, just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent comes with serious perks, and it's completely free to join. And you can earn valuable Built points on your rent and your everyday spending at no extra cost. You can redeem points for flights, hotel stays, and even future rent payments. With over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in their program, I mean, the possibilities are endless. And you can access unique experiences that are exclusive to Built members. And we love using points for travel. Built is going to make it easy to turn rent into rewards. If you're already paying rent, why not make it work for you, right? Start earning point on rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL, and make sure to use our link so that they know we sent you. It's Crossover Thursday, Locked On Broncos, Locked On Colts. Want to say once again, thank you to all you everydayers that make Locked On Broncos, Locked On Colts your first listen of the day every single day. We appreciate you so much for rocking with us. We got you covered anything that happens with the Broncos and the Colts all year long. Jake, let's talk about this, because obviously it's not win or go home just yet, obviously. But I mean, the stakes feel like that, right? It kind of feels like, man, a loss would be just deflating for either of these two teams. Even though the Broncos are at 8-5 right now, this team has been collapsing, in the opportunities that they've gotten even over the last 8 years. So what do the Colts have to do in order to win this game? What are your keys to victory this week?
Yeah, so luckily for the Colts, they're facing the number 1 sack defense in the league, but Anthony Richardson, arguably the best trait he has is sack avoidance. He's able to get out of those so seamlessly. We've seen what it was when Joe Flacco was back there. It's night and day. You have a sitting duck in Joe Flacco versus a guy who is able to escape just about anything with Richardson. So I think that'll be huge. That'll allow him to buy a little more time to find Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, maybe Michael Pittman Jr. in this. But the Colts have had this bye week to look at, that you mentioned Levi Wallace, Chris Abrams-Drain. Have they found something they think they can really exploit? I don't think, if the Colts are going to win this, I don't think it's going to be like a ugly, low-scoring thing. They're probably going to have to trade shots, a little bit like the Browns game. That was kind of exciting, but like you mentioned, didn't need to be that close. But with a defense like this, I think the Colts do have an X factor, and that's a slot receiver in Josh Downs, who I think could be a bit of a zone buster. And then they've got Anthony Richardson, who can avoid those sacks. I don't love him. I favor him a little bit more going into more man coverage schemes than zone. So that gives me a little bit of pause for him as a passer. But unfortunately, I think this is just going to have to be a game where he really, really rises to the occasion. I don't think they're going to be able to afford a stinker from him. But like I mentioned, they have to raise their level with him. You can't have pass catchers that are out there not running routes to the right depth or not turning their heads in time or not just flat out not catching passes. You just cannot shoot yourselves in the foot because, again, this is the biggest game of the year. They lose this and it's probably over. You're not going to be able to come back from 3 games down with 4 games left. Doesn't make sense. So this is a must win. I mean, everyone has got to be on their P's and Q's or the season's pretty much over.
Yeah, it kind of feels like that, obviously, and unfortunately, that's kind of how Broncos fans are thinking as well right now. Because you look at the Colts' final 3 games after this game, right, and you think about, okay, if they beat the Broncos, like they've got a pretty good shot against the Giants and I think it's the Jags and the Titans. I don't know what the order is there, but I mean, you feel like they've got a pretty good shot to maybe run the table there. For the Broncos, you're playing the Colts, and then you have a short week against the Chargers. Then you play the Cincinnati Bengals, and then you play the Kansas City Chiefs in the final week of the season. So you're kind of sitting there thinking, man, you lose this game. Do you win the rest of the, like, how badly would this deflate your playoff hopes? And so, of course, both of these teams, they're trying to get back to the postseason. The Broncos haven't been since they won Super Bowl 50. If they're going to win this game, number one, got to shut down the big play for the Colts passing attack. Obviously, that was a huge problem and a huge issue when it came to their game against the Cleveland Browns, even though they ended up winning, getting 2 pick sixes in that game. Thankfully for that. Otherwise, it would have been disastrous. The Broncos, number 2, they got to capitalize on red zone appearances. Too many times against the Browns and in the last handful of weeks, too many times just settling for 3 points instead of being able to punch the ball in. Got to be able to convert on the money downs when you get down into the red area. And then keep feeding the young guys is my number 3 key to victory here, Jake, because we see the Broncos after the trade deadline. They did nothing at the trade deadline. Everybody was kind of upset about that because you're like, well, do you really want Bo Nix to succeed as a rookie? Like, the guys around him stink. Well, since the trade deadline, they've started to get Marvin Mims more involved, Troy Franklin, Devon Vele, Cortland Sutton is playing well. Involving the young guys, especially I think running back Audric Estime this week, is going to be key for the Denver Broncos getting a win against the Indianapolis Colts. And as we've been discussing, the stakes are extremely high. And if you can get those young guys with a head of steam, just all confidence, full go ahead, you could maybe make some noise here in the postseason.
Yeah, you mentioned Audric Estime, and I was not a fan of you mentioning that because it makes me go and think of, Tank Bigsby from the Jaguars, for example. Guys who are powerful and can just rip through arm tackles and stuff, that's a recipe for disaster. I mean, Estime could come out of nowhere to run for over 100 in that instance if they fed him the ball. But no, that would be a pretty tough matchup for the Colts. But it's all, I feel like it's corny coach speak, but like offensive and defensively, it's all about being where you're supposed to be and just executing at the basic level and just let special things come from there. But it's all about just doing your job in this one, because at least in that way, you're not having so many self-inflicted wounds, and that's really plagued the Colts this year. I think this is a very tough matchup overall. I think there's an avenue for the Colts to win if they do some of those things we've discussed. But yeah, you really want to see how both of these teams respond after a bye week. This is only the second year of Shane Steichen, so I don't think there's not enough data there to know what it looks like post bye week. Especially with Anthony Richardson as his quarterback, but hoping for some positive things.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, look, it's 2 teams fighting for playoff spots with young quarterbacks. The Colts got theirs last year. Broncos got theirs this year. I think Broncos country, Colts fans got a lot to be excited about no matter what, especially with the way Richardson has been, like you said, a couple game-winning drives in the last handful of weeks here. Bo Nix been doing the same, been making some clutch plays for the Broncos. So it's exciting times for both of these teams, and we'll see what happens on Sunday. But Broncos fans, Colts fans, we appreciate you so much for tuning in to today's Crossover Thursday edition, Locked On Broncos. Broncos and Locked On Colts, and make sure you don't miss out on our friends over there, Locked On NFL, for all the latest goings on around the league as well. Make them your second listen after you listen to Locked On Broncos, Locked On Colts. But we appreciate y'all so much. We'll catch you on the next one.